Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Sandra Crawford with Team Alice, here today with Lisa Wang and Karin Bellantoni to talk all about how to get past perfection, get unstuck, and level up your game. This is a session of Office Hours with Lisa Wang, which is a bi-weekly series of AMA-style virtual office hours. So at any time during the discussion, feel free to pop in your questions for Karin in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. These sessions are hosted by Alice, a free website helping business owners start and grow their companies, and WomanMade, a PepsiCo initiative to support female founders with peer-to-peer mentorship, access to tools, relevant content, and expert guidance. So for support in your business and to access the recording after this session, join the free WomanMade community on helloalice.com. Lisa Wang, our host for these office hours, is the founder and CEO of SheWorx. And this week, Lisa is joined by growth strategist Karin Bellantoni to discuss how to get past perfection, get unstuck, and level up your game. Lisa, would you like to take us away?
Sure. Welcome, everyone, to today's live female founder office hours. Again, I'm Lisa Wang, and I help founders with everything from fundraising strategy to storytelling and pitching. And I'm so excited to have everyone here who's part of the community at WomanMade. I'm here today with Karin Bellantoni, who is a growth strategist and someone that I've worked closely with one-on-one, and can't more highly recommend her support as you grow your company. So especially if you are a female founder who is in the weeds of your company, you feel like you're constantly trying to work, you're working in the business instead of on the business on some of the higher level things that you know your talent should be allocated towards, today's conversation will be very useful to you, especially as also we get to that holiday season and burnout becomes, comes just around the corner. So Karin and I will do our best to share insights around your questions today. All right, just to get a quick pulse to see who's excited for today, and in the chat, just let me know where are you tuning in from, what city, type it in the chat and we'll shout some of you out. Awesome, we've got Rachel from New York City. We'll let a few of you type some stuff in. But while I'm doing that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to PepsiCo for making these office hours possible, and Alice for hosting us. This is going to be a really engaging, informative hour. So we've got Anna from San Francisco. Hey, Anna. Hi, Monica. Monica's from Baltimore, Maryland. Alexandra from New York City. Lindsay from Houston. Timmy from New York City as well. Barbara from Sag Harbor, who just launched High Heel Hero on iFund Women. Awesome. I love Karin Khan, who's the CEO of iFund Women. We've got Jeff from Austin. So we've got all these people tuning in from around the country. Monica from San Francisco. Barbara, of course, would love to try those heels. Awesome. So a really great group today. As you hear interesting quotes or valuable nuggets of information, I highly encourage you to write it down, engage with us on social, at PepsiCo, Lisa Wang Wins, Hello Alice, and Karin Bellantoni. And without further ado, today we are joined by Karin Bellantoni. She's the founder of The 180, which is a 90-day program for personal and professional turnarounds. The 180 transports executives and entrepreneurs and teams into the life and business they envision through accelerated change. A catalyst for transformation and an experienced entrepreneur, Karin's first company became a multi-million-dollar business in less than 2 years. And she combines her high-growth business expertise with a tough love approach to develop a qualitative foundation for a company's infrastructure. And clients often refer to her as a game changer and call on her to optimize human capital during times of explosive growth and uncertainty. And she's also the host of the Crazy Busy podcast. Karin, welcome to Office Hours.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. I haven't heard all that in a while. I'm so glad to be here with everybody. Looking forward to a good conversation and good Q&A.
Yeah, and so we're going to kick off this first part with just some fireside chat questions to learn more about tangible tactics that you can apply to your business. And then as you think of questions, just type them in the chat and we'll get them to you. So Karin, just to kick us off, tell us what are some of the core things you work with founders on when you go into their companies, and what are some of the biggest challenges you often see?
Okay, I would say there's so many. They boil down to a few of the same things, though, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to put the podcast out, is because I felt these fundamental things, some of them are generational, some of them are intergenerational. We're getting lost from the old workplace. So when we see more and more people starting up their own companies and they have less and less work experience, you know, you were in some really cool structured environments before you started SheWorx. You also had a great entrepreneurial experience. So you and I didn't have to talk about certain types of habits when we started to work together. Because you had a level of understanding, and then there were other things. So, you know, I would say the first thing I see is that the founder or the leader is not treating themselves as they want to be, right? And sometimes it's because they don't have an operating system for the new version of themselves. And so they're throwing their old software, their old programs onto this new operating system, and it doesn't jive. And so the first thing I would say to founders is, if you feel discomfort, if you're feeling anxiety, you know, trust your inner GPS is right in your belly. It's telling you something's off and you need to talk to somebody. You need to get some guidance, because we have these great tools within us, our head, our heart, and our gut. And the key to success in life is knowing how to work with all three and create a really powerful dance. So I think, you know, not trusting your gut, not understanding that it's not all about the doing, and that you may just not have the right programs that you need to succeed, right? Which is a mindset. And then thirdly, like just some of the stuff I see on a daily basis has to do with this and our poor relationship to this. So this, when I got this, it was a tool. It was really big, looked like a piece of luggage. And it was a tool to make my life easier, to help me connect to my business and not have to stop at dirty payphones. And it didn't rule me, I ruled it. And it was one of the tools in my arsenal. And now I feel like that relationship is flipped. So kind of helping people with just some simple relationship boundaries with their best friend, the phone.
Got it. So I want to go to the first thing you said about the operating system and not treating yourself the way that you should be. What does that typically look like for founders, and how does that end up contributing to, you know, consequences down the road?
Yeah, the consequences are burnout, and the consequences are also triggering parts of your brain that cause you to not be your best self, right? So if you don't know what it looks like to be a successful founder with $1 million company, let's say, and that's your goal, then you don't have the operating system, right? You don't have the daily habits, the planning, the skill set, the mindset, or you just don't know what it is, so you haven't pulled those traits out yet, right? And so we're still behaving. I mean, at some point, Mrs. Fields had to stop making cookies, and she had to develop and design a system for growth that involved replacing herself in some pretty key areas, including making the product that was her bread and butter, right? Unintended. So, you know, we have to know when it's okay to stop doing things. And what I see a lot in women, so just to step back on this a little bit, we actually have 3 brains. And the 3 different brains we have are really powerful to know about, because the first brain is not built for pleasure or learning or collaboration or closing big deals. It has one purpose, and it's, am I safe? Am I not safe? And because for so long, especially women, were not safe, you know, from caveman times up until even the 70s in New York, I didn't feel safe walking down the street. That amygdala can get tripped up so easily over nothing. And the way you know that you're out of your executive function, where you make great decisions, where you're creative, where you're collaborative, is your mouth starts to go dry, your chest starts to go like this, and you can't find the right words. And we've all had this happen. And especially at times where we don't expect it to happen, it can create like a little bit of a trigger and a downturn. But once you've tripped up that amygdala and you're out of this part of the brain, your only goal is to get back into reason. And so first tip of our conversation is, if you feel yourself losing it, if you feel yourself slipping into that fight or flight, I call it fight or flight, freeze or fawn mode, is you can just literally go like this, because the cortisol you sent down to your gut will come right back up to your brain and have you kind of thinking in your right mind again. You can also go like this to kind of bring you back to the present. So yet staying out of the fear state means you might have to be a little uncomfortable. It means you might have to stop and go, whoa, wait a minute, I lost my directions. I might be lost. I might need to stop and ask somebody for help getting back on the road, right? And there are those kinds of people who do that. When that was a thing, you know, before this was a thing, I'd roll my window down every block if I had to. I just didn't want to waste my time. But I remember driving around with people who would never stop. They just were determined to get it themselves. So that's how you get burnout, you know, driving around without the right direction, thinking you can do it all yourself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And what do you recommend when you do find yourself in that state, like you've already free-falled, right? And I think sometimes there's a momentum thing where you're like, this is the only way I know how to operate. Like, how do you do that 180 where you just get out of your typical habits to create something that is more productive?
Yeah. So you mean like it's just during the week and you're stuck? Because, you know, I had this the other day, a young woman I'm coaching at a bigger company. It felt her boss was an evil person and she was terrified of her. And the woman I saw on the Zoom screen was a child version of the woman I usually see. And so that's another thing to remember, is that when we're in that state, it's really not our adult self, it's the child version of us. And the adult version of us can really handle most anything. I mean, for those of you watching and listening, you know, you're already trying to work in the light. You're already seekers. You're already people who are open and interested in personal and professional growth, and the two are tied together. So, you know, you have to remind yourself sometime that you slip, you get back up, and every slip should have a little, what did I learn from that? And hopefully I'll make a different mistake next time. Or what can I build into my process? You know, for example, if I got somewhere to pitch 5 minutes late and that caused me into that downward spiral and I couldn't recover and the pitch stunk, you know, you can make a joke later and try to get back in with the graces of these people. Or you can say, what I learned is I need to be an hour early and next door at a restaurant sipping on a tea so that I'm never late again. And even if that's an extra hour I invest in every pitch, it won't put me in that terrible, see them as, wow, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I have a problem being late anyway. And so now this stopped me from maybe a bigger pitch that I would have failed at, right? And that's sort of the right attitude, is everything's a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what you talked about was trusting your gut also in terms of intuition. I think one thing that with experience we all learn is that every time we didn't listen, we look back and we're like, I already knew, right? Like, I should have listened.
Yes.
And I think that is something that as women, that's a superpower. It's like that intuitive self that when it feels off, to actually trust it instead of trying to rationalize and like logicize it in a way that makes sense.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that for a lot of the women listening, that is a key thing. When I do speaking engagements and I have an umbrella I do that under called the Intuition Salon, people come and they think this thing, intuition, is something outside themselves that they have to learn about, or something inside themselves that they don't really know how to control or manage. And so it's about, when you get the message, knowing yourself enough to know what is the channel that my message comes in on? So I can start, if I'm a listener, if I hear the message, I can start working on listening better and trusting my gut as it comes in through my ear. Those are clairaudient people. The visual people are called clairvoyant. They actually see pictures or symbols or signs. And so, you know, if you think you're a hypervisual person and you learn a lot by seeing, and you've seen pictures and symbols before, then, you know, work on in your meditation, asking questions and thinking about what you see. The sentient people kind of have it the roughest because we feel what you feel. So if you're in my office with a stomach ache, I might actually feel it and go, do you have a stomach ache? Because I never get stomach aches. So it must be yours that I'm sensitive to. And then like my superpower is the cognizance. The claircognizance means we just know, but we don't have any visual proof or anything we've heard. So as my teacher told me a few years ago, boy, when you were younger, you must have sounded like a know-it-all. And there are times for claircognizant people where we lose our confidence because we don't have that tangible, I saw it, I saw a symbol, I heard directionally, you know, my intuition, but we know, and we know, and we know, and we know, and it's been shown time and time again that a mother will know something, or a twin will know that their twin is sick, and there's this psychic connection, right? And that knowing sometimes is hard, especially if you're new at your business, to say to somebody, you know, I just know this, and you're going to have to trust me on it. And if I'm wrong, I'll, you know, you can make me buy dinner next time or whatever. But there are times we just have to, even without evidence, trust, because we do know a lot of things that we haven't been taught.
Yeah. Rachel has a question, and she says, I've been thinking a lot about intuition lately, but I try to balance intuition with thoughtful preparation / research and not acting too rash. How do you balance intuition, which is what you think you know you should do right away, with ensuring that you consider everything before pulling the plug on really big decisions?
That's such a great question. And why I designed a workshop called Intuitive Decision Making. There's a little ebook that goes with that. And if you want, after this in the replay, I can give you the link for your audience to download it. But basically in that ebook, I teach you how to listen to your gut. What is your gut saying? What is your heart saying? What is your head saying? And I take you through a process of self-questioning that it gives you a much firmer decision because you feel you've gone through a more thorough process. And so you can't do it on everyday things like, what should I have, the chicken or the fish for lunch? It would be too time consuming. But for big decisions about strategy, about making big purchases, about aligning yourself with a new partner, you know, you definitely want to take yourself through some sort of a process. And if you don't have one now, then I think mine could be really helpful.
Yeah, awesome. So I actually developed a framework in terms of how I make decisions, especially as of recent, based off of all of my past experiences. So the first one is just F yes or no.
I love that.
So the first one
is your quick gut.
Quick. It's like, if it's not a F yes, it's a no, right? And that's because what we do, especially, I think especially as women who want to be accommodating and polite and not necessarily ruffle feathers, like that's what society has conditioned us to do. We're like, well, maybe I will take this meeting. Well, I don't really know what purpose it's serving, but I don't want to cancel the coffee since they asked me for coffee, right? So that's definitely not an F yes. So that's a no. So that's the first layer. So let's say they pass into the F yes. And I'm like, love the energy, love the vibe, like they're doing great things, like there's potential synergy here. Then the second one is what I call the impact profit consideration. And this is this ultimately impactful or just a momentary distraction? And so this is obviously I think it relates to both professional and personal, but it's like professionally, you know, is the amount of effort required to do this, does it have a greater double bottom line impact down the line? And I say double bottom line being like profit as well as, you know, serving this personal desire for impact. Or is it just like, you know, an opportunity that's being thrown at me? And so let's say it does pass the impact and profit consideration. Then it's like, okay, I basically decided to do it. And at that point, it's action. And so I subscribe to this thing of do it with passion or not at all. So it's like once you've committed to a decision, you have to exercise intention and swiftness of action, like not look back, not be like, oh, if only, what if, because it's a useless, you know, it's useless use of your time. And you basically like stay the course because you've made that decision and now you're like full on intention making that happen. And then you reevaluate if there comes a point when you're no longer passionate about doing it, right? And reevaluate if you actually need to make a new decision about whether it's a new partner, a new idea, a new, you know, X, Y, Z. So that's like a lot of that is intuitive, but then there's also the logical consideration of like, let's look at the cost benefit and like ROI of taking this, whether it's a huge decision about partnering with someone or it's even like, should I take this coffee meeting and spend an hour of my time commuting and drinking coffee?
Yeah, I think that reevaluating is such a critical piece, and we almost need to do that, you know, weekly, because there are things on our to-do lists and then we keep adding things. It's like if I come in with 3 new dresses, I have to go to my closet and pull 3 out. It's the way it is when you live in New York. There's only so much space, right? So this idea of reevaluating, am I still in love with this? Is this still a decision I want to make? It's my time. Yeah.
Yeah. And a follow-up question from Rachel. She says, so hard to not have the what if or self-doubt thoughts and just stay the course. What do you do when the self-doubt inevitably pops up?
Okay, well, one of the things you can do is also a good follow-up question from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. I think that for me, taking out a pen and pad is really valuable. And I know a lot of my younger women clients have gone back even to day planners and taken their calendars so that they're offline as well as online. I think there's a connective thing, you know, around that. So when you make the decision, if you write out your statement and says, I am making this decision because, and if you use your model, for example, Lisa, then you can say, I have, you know, taken these steps and I am committed and I will not reevaluate this decision unless one of these 2 catastrophic things happen or 1 month has passed. So it's sort of, it's like saying, you know, I'm on a diet, but the cookies look so good. Maybe the cookies can't be in the house. Like you have to remove it. You have to make a commitment that is keepable, you know, that you can keep, because by and large, men, generally speaking, when they make these commitments, they're highly focused and they go for it. And women rebalance a lot, and neither way is perfect. It is important to rebalance and to reguess and to redecide and not just go riding off into the sunset towards your goal without ever looking back. But you have to sort of catch yourself when you're in that state of going back and forth, Rachel, and say, you know, am I well fed? Am I rested? Have I meditated today? You know, am I doing the things for myself? That, because that's the only time I second guess, is when I go, oh yeah, it's 10 hours later, I'm still at the office and I forgot to eat the last time I should have, right? So I can tell then that that's not the confident version of myself, the adult version of myself. So sort of pick up the mirror and go, where am I right now? You know, am I the person to be judging this? Or should I save this for tomorrow? And then come back the next day with your journal and go, gee, I made this commitment. Why am I questioning it? So check yourself first and then check the decision.
Yeah, I think, Karin, that was a really great point, because it's essentially the idea of like not making big decisions when you're out of your peak state. Because when you are hungry or tired or cold or angry, right, you're making decisions from scarcity and a reaction versus your best self. So one thing I realized today, so I'm I'm not a morning person. I have totally come to terms with that. And if they say you can't be successful if you're not a morning person, I think that's totally false. But I don't do well at breakfast meetings. I just don't. And I made the mistake of recently saying yes to a breakfast meeting, but the person was an yes person. So I was willing to make that sacrifice because they also came from out of town. But I knew, I was like, I'm just gonna be late. Like, not a breakfast person, but I'm showing up, and I've committed to this, and they do fulfill the second category of like impact and profit. And now that I've committed to it, I'm doing it with full intention. Yes, Rachel said it's funny. You used to run a breakfast series of SheWorx. I know. It is really funny.
Eat breakfast well either for a different reason. I'm so hungry that by the time I get to meet you, I've had to already eat, so I'm having a second breakfast. Either that or my blood sugar.
It is a very ironic observation. It's true, and I'm totally not. And now I'm fully embracing that side of myself when I'm post-acquisition. But yeah, I would say the other
talks about this. You and I have had many talks about this, so I'm glad you're embracing it. Anyway.
Yeah. The other, Rachel, I would say to like dealing with those what ifs is, and this might be counterintuitive, is one, questioning whose voice it actually is that's doubting you. Because as women, we have all these narratives, like we've been, I think, brainwashed by society that tells us, I talk about enoughness in my Enoughness podcast, that you're not pretty enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not smart enough, you're not experienced enough, you're not popular enough, you're not feminine enough, all of these things, right? So we've been brought up in a culture that causes us to question ourselves and doubt ourselves as a natural instinct. And so one thing I learned was, okay, this voice keeps coming up, but it's not actually my voice. This is like my mom's voice back in the day when she would say I wasn't good enough for this. This is my gymnastics coach's voice that told me I wasn't enough this. So I think that was one thing. As I developed core confidence, learning how to question what that default voice was, which is a default was self-doubt. And then the second thing is kind of on the other side of that, learning how to not take yourself too personally and your decisions as like a life or death decision. And I learned how to do this by observing men, actually, because when you think about the way men make decisions, they're like, it's like playing a game. They're like, let me make this move. It's probably not as well researched, but like, I'm just going to make this move and like lob this thing out there. If it doesn't work, we'll just move. We'll go on this side of the chessboard, right? We'll just keep moving, and we keep like pivoting until we get to a point. And what I see with a lot more women is like, it's a life or death decision, right? It's super serious. It's like, I don't know if I'm ready to launch. I don't know if this, like, what if this happens? What if this happens? And the lens that I've seen a lot of men go is like, well, what if, for women, it's what if this goes wrong? And for men, it's like, well, what if it goes right? So I think learning how to train yourself in that core confidence by flipping your brainwashed societal voice that says, what if this goes wrong, into what if it could go right?
Yeah, it's the half full, half empty, glasses overflowing theory. Yeah, I think anytime you hear a voice that is not confident, it's always fear-based, and you're always in the wrong part of the brain, because the voice of reason that says, I don't know if this is a good decision, isn't scared. It's just going, oh, wow, I better listen to that voice. Maybe I should check this or check that or go back to it. And so when you are calm and grounded, you don't get as upset about getting triggered by that stuff. You're easily triggered when you're not well cared for, number one, and number two, when it's something that scares you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So on that same vein, Karin, I'd love to ask you about perfectionism and how to overcome that.
Well, thanks for asking about that, because that was my last salon, and I developed a model around perfectionism and what happens when we go into that state. And then the flip side of that model is sort of the antidote and the steps you need to take. And someone who was at the event brought it to his therapist, and the therapist went, "This is really good. Too bad I can't use it. She's trademarked it." So I think this comes therapist approved, this information. And I think it's really important to understand that perfectionism is not a cool trait to have in its truest form. And I'm not talking about somebody who's neat and tidy or likes to make things look a certain way or present themselves a certain way. I'm talking about this sort of controlling energy that says, I can't sleep if there's a fork in my sink that's not clean, dried, and put away, or I can't present something until it's perfect, and then it never gets presented. So for many women, especially the ones that I see, they're coming because they've tried so many times to get something past a certain level, but they've reached the edges of their box and something keeps them contained. And that something frequently is perfectionism, which is really one of the 4 fear responses. So when we go into fight or flight, there's actually 2 other response personas. One is called freeze and one is called fawn. And so the fawners, in my estimation, are the people who believe that the price of admission to any relationship is keeping the person with power happy. And so these are the people inside companies that say, yes, sure, yes. They don't even think. They don't think, do I have time to do this? They just say yes. Now, personally, I love to say yes. It's a nice feeling. It makes me feel good when a client says, oh, I don't want to wait a week. Can you see me earlier? But I don't just say yes. I have to look at my calendar. I have to make sure I have the quality time to make that work. And I would be in a fear state if I simply reacted and said, yes, don't worry, I'll fit you in somewhere, and started moving things around because I was feeling like our relationship was at risk if I couldn't make space for you or I couldn't say yes to you. So I think that is a good way to know, is this a perfectionist thing or not? Is if I'm feeling frightened that not saying yes will impact our relationship and that I could be at risk in the relationship, right? And then the second one is just, are you having those physical symptoms, even thinking about it, of the pitter-pattery heart, the dry mouth, the obsessiveness when you can't stop thinking about something. And so what I'm teaching now inside companies is how to, as a leader, know what your own fear response is. So I'm a fighter and a fawner. And I respond differently if I'm advocating for somebody than if I'm advocating for myself. And so that learning that has helped me understand how to be when I engage with somebody who triggers my fear response. It's helped me understand what my triggers are. And more importantly, it's helped me understand when I see someone else doing something that they're just in a state of a fear response. And especially if they're fawning all over me, they're afraid of me or the relationship going bad or something like that, right? So we used to say these people were brown nosers or ass kissers or those kinds of things, and now we call them pleasers. But it's all codependence, and what it says is I'm not good enough unless I'm perfect, and so I'm not anything because I'll never be perfect. Like there is no such thing. This measurement by which we're putting forth isn't real. It's imagined, and it's also a delay tactic, right, to keep yourself safe. So what happens for perfectionists, and you can put in the chat if this sounds familiar to you, if you identify this way, is the first trigger is that they get overwhelmed and they literally, so someone gives you a project or you get a chance to propose, right? Proposals are kind of the worst. It's terrible. It's a big opportunity. And yet, and I do the same thing, right? So I get the proposal, I could start right now. I have so much time on this, and get ahead of things. And then I defer and defer and defer. And as I defer, it really becomes procrastination. And as the procrastination develops, and there's even a test I give people to say, at the point you're procrastinating, don't beat yourself up, because that pushes you further down into the model. Stop and ask yourself, oh, that's interesting. I have this big opportunity with this company to present a proposal, but I'm deferring it. I wonder what that's about. Maybe I don't have enough information. Maybe I need to go back and ask more questions. Maybe I'm not enough to get this done. I need to bring in a partner to really wow them, right? Maybe I'm deferring because I don't have what I need, and I need to take this intuitive trigger and not just push, 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 right? And so procrastination isn't always a bad thing. Now, if you realize, well, I have the answers to the questions, you start chunking the project into pieces, saying, why couldn't I take literally a baby step with this, which literally might be putting time on your calendar to do it. What happens is, if you're doing the procrastinating and it isn't for a reason, and you keep doing it, you're going to hit the self-doubt, self-loathing until you literally bottom out. And what happens when you bottom out, generally speaking, is that you've got now a very short window to produce this thing you're supposed to produce. And you go into what I call a forced flow. So you think you're in flow, but you're just scared shitless because the bear's running up behind you. And so you bang it out, right? You get it done. And you have even this forced sense of accomplishment, the fake sense of accomplishment, because you go, gee, I guess I did it again. I pulled it out. But the truth is, there's no way that the quality of that work is what you could have given it, which would have made you feel 100 times better, which cumulatively builds your confidence, which then overshadows the perfectionism. See, it's a long game. It's not about arguing in the moment. It's about going, over the next year, I want to build my confidence by 25%, by 50%. And some of the ways I'm going to do that is by accepting the decisions I make and keeping the commitments to myself. And I'm going to do that by setting smaller goals, right? And so the idea is, if I had to say to myself, the first goal in this proposal is simply to write a one-page plan of how I'll do it. Step 1, make time on the calendar. Step 2, begin with the end in mind. What is the end result I want to create? Step 3, what would be a first step to get there? And so I'm a big fan of self-inquiry, because that gets us back into the really smaller pieces. So when a baby tries to get up, and they're taking their first steps, their first little baby steps, we don't chastise them because they look like little drunkards, we applaud and go, this is amazing. And yet we just tear ourselves up, when we don't take those first steps as well as we could, instead of going back and going, okay, I got off to a rough start, replay, how am I going to get this done now? Do I need to talk to a friend? But you want to avoid at all costs that way you trigger your adrenaline to go into forced flow and forced productivity, because it's not giving the real you, the quality work that you could be putting out to people.
Yeah, and you touched upon a lot of things that I want to highlight. So the first thing is the forced flow, which is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs end up in, because to be a successful entrepreneur, first and foremost, you need to be optimistic. Like, you need to believe in a better future. You need to believe that you have the capability to create that better future that maybe other people don't see. And so the optimism is what shields you from the inevitable rejection that you get left and right as you're navigating that journey. The not as good side of that founder optimism is sometimes we think we can do a lot of things in like an unrealistic time frame, and we put way too much on our plate, that you realize as crunch time comes, you're like, I don't know why I put myself through this. And at that point, you're like, I just got to do it. That's something that I've done many times. And Karin, you've seen that with, putting SheWorx events together, where, people were expecting a really great experience. And as someone who is naturally a perfectionist, it was like, this needs to be on par, it needs to be quality. But it would be at the expense of my own sanity, my own health, to just make sure that it was happening. And every time I knew, it's like, if only we had like another month to do this, because we were already really ambitious about how quickly we could put things together. And actually just today, I, based off of that pattern and that experience that I know is something that I typically do, I had been feeling like I was rushing something, and I have a partner in doing this, and I told that partner, like, we can pull this off, but it's going to be rushed. I'm going to kill myself over the next few weeks, and it could be so much better if we just push it out a month.
I think that's renegotiating, and that's the adult version of you. And so, when you go into this thing, it's like, okay, wow, I have a choice. I can hustle, I can pull this off, it'll be okay. Or I can make it outstanding and take some lessons to go forward with that will build my confidence. But what you said about piling on, that's part of the perfectionism, is procrastination and piling. And what pilers do is they unconsciously pile in order to push themselves into the forced flow. So the piling actually helps you generate, but here's the deal, Lisa, that was your strategy before, and it worked well for you, and you got through a lot of amazing accomplishments with that strategy. You hear, good dog, she always gets it done. Now you're at a different stage of your career. People are buying something different from you. It isn't about how much you check off the list each day. It's more about quality. And so now you need a different program to put on this new operating system to kind of loop back to how we started, because that strategy won't work. And 10 years from now, it'll put you into like an autoimmune. Seriously, people get sick from this sort of behavior. And it's interesting, the women that I see get these autoimmunes, they're all in their late 30s to early 40s, because they're at that stage where hormone is shifting a little bit and they haven't changed the way they used to do things. So we have to, no successful woman still cleaning her bathroom floor, right? We have to know when it's time to let go and let other people help us. And even in a startup, if you don't have a team and you're operating with, interns and some free help, then you just have to do less. You're going to have to pick fewer things and do them really well, or you're just going to land up at the finish line, exhausted.
Yeah, because that goes off to Barbara's comment. She says, but in startups, we have no choice but to do everything. And what I was going to say to that is very similar to reemphasize what you just said, Karin, is that maybe you need to redefine what everything means. Because the everything is like the piler, right? Mm-hmm. I actually do this every once in a while to check myself when I feel that overwhelm. I do everything in my iPhone notes. So then I write everything that I am working on right now, and I just list it out, and it's like 15 projects. And I'm like, I know that this is unreasonable now, but I needed to list it out to be like, okay, so I know that I can operate at a very high capacity. And to your point, like, I do well in forced flow states, and 15 is just, it's like, let's see if we can get to 5. Right? Like 5 that are a real priority now. And then in that 5, what are the top 2 or 3? And that really gets to, okay, from those, you have your 3 priorities, like big project end goals, which ideally they're kind of, they're synergistic, right? Doing well in this helps this one, helps this one. But really, when we come to the end, I was like, everything, even though they're separate projects, it meshes to my singular mission, which is all around changing the narrative for women, you know, empowering and changing that like internal narrative in particular, which is very similar to what you know, we do together.
Yes, I think, you know, for me, I even have a little impact questionnaire. You know, if I take this project, is it in alignment with an ideal buyer strategy? Is this person likely to be an ideal client? Does this project have longevity? You know, does it meet, you know, my mission? Is it the kind of company that's mission driven, that focuses on young leadership? So you know, you can only pick some of these things, and part of this, Barbara, is about saying yes to too many things. I think that's one way. The other way is just to examine yourself a little better. Like, Lisa, to your point about piling, why do I know about this? Well, because I'm a former piler, and I would have these wonderful dinner parties when I lived in Laguna Beach, and I would be finished for 2 days afterwards, you know. And my boyfriend said to me once, I think that you think every time you have a dinner party, it's a chance to fix everything that's wrong in the house. And babe, no one's going to look under your bed or your closets upstairs when you're feeding them down here in the dining room. And I went, how is it? I had no idea I was doing that, but that's exactly what I would do. I would go try to make every single thing, seen or unseen, perfect. It was like a forced flow state and a checklist. And, you know, wherever that comes from is probably likely a childhood issue around people seeing me as, and my home as, perfect. And I'm a good cook. No one was coming for my organizational skills. They were coming for the food and my company, you know? So sometimes it's just about really observing yourself and your behavior and what's necessary.
Yeah. I think it's especially, I think any woman who's tuning into this is probably multi-talented. And so, you know, I always would, and I still get these comments of like, you're always doing like so many different things, Lisa, and it's like, you're actually executing on them. And it used to be, I was like, I know, you know, and I was proud that I was executing, but to your point of reprogramming, I was like, okay, that's a signal that, you know, I'm obviously going to do it if I say I'm going to do it, but like, imagine if I could put the passion and rigor into like making this one thing really, really good. And so like your blessing of your ability to be talented and do everything is also your curse. And to be able to think about that of, okay, again, goes back to the decision, the second layer, which was like, impact, profit, consideration. Like, is this ultimately impactful or just a momentary distraction? And I think oftentimes when you really like let everything go and you look at it, you're like, the majority of things that I was dealing with is momentary distractions. There's a friend of mine who always talks about getting to inbox 0. She's like, I'm so close. And then of course, you know, the next day so she whittled down from like thousands to hundreds, and she's like, I'm almost there. And then she got like, I'm at 20-ish. So this has been her goal. And she's in a place where she feels extreme burnout. She's talked to me about this multiple times. And I've told her, I was like, you were made to do better things. Like, you were not put on this earth to manage your email, which is, you know, it's like this inbox 0 thing is a distraction of priority. Again,
it's an old meme. It's from when we didn't get so many emails, you know. So I think some of the problem is new systems have shown up and old systems still exist, and there aren't really no one's put out the right protocols for what. It's really personal preferencing. And then, you know, really what I have figured out in all of the training and coaching I've done is that we have the first generation of leaders who have woken up in the morning without any space between them, all their clients, all their friends, all their collaborative partners, all their vendors are right in bed with them. And this lack of space is a lack of distinction between who you are as a human and who you are professionally. And so in the old days, you know, there was a little bit more separation because no one called your dad, right, at 11 o'clock at night to dump some business problem on him or deliver a report to his door that he had to read. You know, we have that open access. That doesn't mean you have to leave the door open. The phone has a switch on it, you know, and if you're not afraid of missing out or not being available all the time, which is disabling to other people, by the way, if there are any parents out there, the number one thing that millennial leaders tell me that frustrates them about their upbringing is that they were never allowed to solve problems for themselves. So if their parents are available at the push of a button on a phone, they got an answer to their question, and now they feel embarrassed that they don't have the problem solving skills. So it is disabling to just be available all the time to people. And it is disabling to yourself to think you're that important and to not give yourself those blocks of time where those notifications are off and that you have the space. And then the other thing is, I think people just start off the journey like if you were driving from here to Florida, Lisa, you would have a plan. You'd say, well, we're going to drive 200 miles a day. We're going to stop in this city, that city. You know, maybe you change and modify your plan. We got to a town. It's a shithole. We don't like it. We're going to leave. Let's get up and go. We're off track. We'll remake our plan. But we wake up in the morning, and when I polled some of my clients' employees, hundreds of people came back. 80% of them arrive and dive. They do no planning. They open this machine and the machine takes them away into the day. And I say, I start my crazy busy workshop with a question: how do you even know if today's going to be a good day? Have you set forth objectives that will help you know at 6 p.m. this was a great day? And do you know how many things you can actually get done in a day? Because I think the answer surprises people, right? It's 3 to 5. And so you're right. If you have 15 things on your list for the week, and that's 3 things a day for 5 days a week, and those are tasks, by the way, not projects like you were talking about. So I think the more you set up, the more you plan to do the work, the better the execution goes and the more fulfilling it is.
Yeah. And I hope that addressed, Timmy, your question, which was around priorities and setting priorities and prioritizing yourself. Said the default for most is prioritize others, so there's unlearning to be done. So what wisdom or tactics that you could share? So I hope we address that a bit. I like this question, Karin, around how will you know you had a good day? Because I think that also speaks to the thing that women rarely do, which is celebrate ourselves, right? And say like, good job, you did it. And this, like, I'm proud of myself. I've been learning how to change my internal dialogue, like, which I used to never do, where I think back on my day and I think like, I'm really proud of myself. Like, that's it, you know? And it's like, I think that's very rare to have that as a default, you know, in your mind at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think that even saying that, I'm sure every single person listening saw your energy change all around your face. When we hear positive comments from ourselves, we feel almost as good as when someone else says it. And sometimes it's such a shock to our system, we're just in a forced smile. But finding counter things to say, and I'm really fond of, I have this strange little habit. When I get really negative, I say cancel. And I've been known to be in the middle of the street and go, cancel, cancel. Somebody will say, excuse me, man, what, did you say something to me? And I'll say, oh no, I was just canceling a negative thought. They say, well, how do you do that? I go, you just say cancel. And it's a cute little habit that kind of makes you aware of how much you're being negative, and then you can flip it, right?
Yeah.
So whatever you said, you can say the opposite.
Yeah. And I think also having, like, learning how to not be uncomfortable with complimenting yourself. So even I had a friend I was talking to the other day, and she was saying, she was just sharing some frustration about something that we all inevitably get, which is thinking that it's a meeting, and then the man acts like unprofessional, asks you out for drinks, and you're like, I don't really want to go for drinks, but like I feel like I need to, the whole discomfort thing. And she was explaining this, and she was like, the thing is, I get that I am a good looking, like I am a beautiful, like, she's like, I don't want to sound conceited, but like I am good looking. And so it was so hard for her to say, she was almost like blaming herself for saying, I am beautiful, in trying to explain her discomfort with this guy asking her for drinks, because she didn't want to sound conceited in telling the story. I was like, it's okay, you are beautiful. Like that, like, let's just say that's a given. And here's the thing, like, if you're uncomfortable, don't go to that meeting. And your discomfort is.
And the truth is, while we're on this topic that I have so much opinion about, the truth is that a man who is approached around your business, who has other intentions and wants you to go to drinks, it's not even about her being attractive. It's about him being inappropriate, and he might be that way with lots of other women. So I think it's just time for us to be okay with saying things like, I just have a personal preference. I prefer to take all first pitch meetings over coffee in the morning. I'm fresh in the morning. That's when I do business. See you for coffee. If you're interested in my business, I'll see you for coffee. That's what I do. I mean, there is no reason for you to think someone's above you because they're a venture capitalist. There is absolutely no truth to that, or anyone you're selling anything to. You're an equal human being stature. And you get that clear in your head right off the bat. They do not have more power than you. In fact, most of these folks that I've engaged with couldn't be doing some of the things you're doing. The hard work you're putting in, the risk you're taking, the level of stress that you've put on yourself. So do not think of yourself as below, or that you have to conform. I have a policy. I do all my, unless I know someone, I do all my meetings in the morning. It's when I'm fresh, or I do all my meetings in the morning.
Yeah. And last note I would make, just on the venture capital side, as someone who has obviously worked with a number of venture capitalists in the space, advice I give to founders is like thinking about it that venture capitalists are, at the end of the day, they're middlemen, right? They are actively, like, the majority of VCs, especially if they're small funds, don't actually have that much money, because their salary in itself is only 2% of the funds that they raise. They're constantly raising money from LPs. They're under pressure to return the LPs' money by investing in companies. I've talked to VCs who are saying, I wish I could be an entrepreneur. I wish I had the guts to be an entrepreneur. And really, like, reframing, again, always reframing the narrative. It's like, we're not begging for their money. Like, there is no begging here, because if it's not this VC, if it's not this investor, there's the next one and the next one and the next one, right? So just want to leave you guys with that you guys.
Yeah, and on the prioritization, if you didn't get enough detail there, one of the crazy busy episodes is devoted solely to that, and I go into detail, and I think, it could be helpful for anyone looking to get better at that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much, Karin and Lisa, for one of my favorite discussions that we've had on the office hours. Just for everyone who joined us, the link to the recording of this session and to register for the next one will be in the WomanMade community on Alice, and the link is in the chat box over there. Really, really great discussion. I wish we could do this one every week, because this topic was just amazing, even just listening. So thank you all both so much, and thanks everyone who was able to join us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.